Hello, welcome to the Meachum Village YouTube channel. So I want to address a common objection that we've gotten since launching this ministry in August 2023. And that objection is, why does it only focus on Black American families? Why is this a marriage ministry? Why is this a family ministry that only focuses on Black Americans? We're all part of the human race. You know, Christ welcomed everybody. This is divisive. Now, the overwhelming majority of the comments and letters we've gotten have been very, very positive and supportive. But I want to address this because I feel like it comes from a place of ignorance. I don't know who the people are who have emailed or commented like this, but I suspect they belong to groups that have the luxury of not having to think about race and its impact on their families. And so I'm going to assume it's coming from a place of ignorance and just explain this for folks who are wondering, if where our heads are. So think of it like an emergency room. In an emergency room, you can have a bunch of people who've been there for hours, but only the folks with the highest acuity level will get seen. Only the folks who with the most severe condition will go see the doctor. Everybody else is going to wait. That's how we look at the dysfunction in Black families. The acuity level is so high, the severity is so bad that we need to give it special focused attention. We have the highest rates of divorce. We have the lowest rates of marriage. We have the highest rates of single parenthood. We have the highest rates of dropping out of high school, unemployment, highest rates of business failure. Basically, every metric that stabilizes a family in our country, we are failing at. That is the equivalent of a person with a festering, bleeding, gaping wound about to get infected and get amputated. I mean, we're showing all of the signs of a severe emergency that requires very specific targeted attention. I suspect that a lot of this criticism comes from Black Americans having this image of loaning our support to other groups very generously. And then those groups outrun us. We combine our agendas with their agendas. We show up for their marches. And before you know it, they've gotten all of the green lights and open doors that we were fighting for. Well, the purpose of this ministry is to help us put our own oxygen mask on first. It has a very exclusive focus for this group. We support others who are focusing on their groups, but Scripture has something very specific to say about Black Americans and our family dysfunction. And the reason for that is because our history is different. Our history in the United States is so different, so unique, devastatingly tragic, and those patterns still have a bearing today. In the United States, we don't get very good education in history unless you do it in college on your own, unless you major in it, minor in it, or something like that. You really won't know kindergarten basics about American history, or especially not Black American history. But that doesn't mean history doesn't have a bearing on current times and the future. And I think these questions also might be coming from that level of ignorance as well. We're just not aware of how history can still have aftershocks 100 years later. And because Black Americans have such a unique and tragic history, we have to pay very close attention to how those patterns have been passed down over generations. We have to pay close attention to how they started out as forced trauma, and then we took the wheel and started driving our own trains of dysfunction. So no other group has had to go through slave breeding in the United States. No other group has had to have their families scattered in multiple waves of sometimes forced migrations. No other group has had to have their families scattered between the 50s and 70s in these fake land renewal programs that bulldozed but never rebuilt. No other group has been as targeted for welfare policies, predatory loans, what else? Mass incarceration and drug policies. No other group has been so targeted. And on the other hand, Black Americans have to start asking ourselves, why are we so easily defeated? Why do we so easily fall into every trap set? Scripture has answers for these historical patterns, and our only hope for fixing our broken families is to look to Scripture to correct these patterns so we don't continue them. Too many Black families are on their fourth and fifth generation of alcoholics, fourth and fifth generation of single mothers or divorces. Too many of us can't even name 3 healthy married couples in our families. That's how broken and fractured it is. The sad thing, though, is that too often that history is used as the excuse. It's not used simply as a reference point. Our position is that we look at the history to detect the pattern, but we know it's up to us to rely on Yahweh and Scripture to correct it. We know that even under oppression, Yahweh expects obedience. Even when you're in handcuffs, he expects you to be righteous. And so our goal is not to look at these historical traumas and fold our hands and say, oh, well, see, we were victims. Our goal is to say, how can we avoid this trap next time? How can we equip our children to avoid these traps? This ministry is named for John Berry Meachum, who for us is one of the heroes of the faith in Black American history. He was enslaved in Virginia, freed himself and his whole family from slavery, including his wife. They moved to Missouri to be abolitionists and educators, and they had literacy centers to teach both freed and enslaved Blacks how to read. He was a pastor, and he wrote a letter to Black Americans coming out of slavery about exactly what they would need to do to navigate freedom and avoid being oppressed again. Here's one of his best tips. It's a common thing for people to suppose that our oppression is occasioned by severe restrictions and disabilities laid upon us by others. But the truth is, you keep yourselves down. For as long as you continue to speak evil of the other and use abusive epithets and ridicule and reproach one another with opprobrious names, just so long will you be oppressed. For it is an old and true maxim, if you do not respect yourself, others will not respect you. Now, he said this back in 1847, when the Fugitive Slave Act was almost alive and well, close to being passed. I mean, even in a time when slavery was still alive and well, he's looking around at his people saying, freedom from slavery is not going to be enough. You have to improve how you treat each other. And right now, when we look at our marriages and when we look at our families, we are still treating each other with contempt. We're still treating each other. We're still not following the biblical roles outlined for us, and it's causing conflict in the most sacred relationship we should have. So our goal, again, is to take a look at those specific patterns that Black Americans have inherited from our very unique history and use Scripture to correct them. The third reason this focuses on Black Americans is because this has been a gap in Black churches. Black churches, and I mean Black church culture, meaning the rituals and, the practices of the Black church, have been the centerpiece of our social life for a long time until the 70s, when it started to kind of lose its relevance to younger people. And this is one of those areas where the Black church has had either a huge blind spot or it's been recklessly negligent. I was recently listening to the audiobook of Marriage Be Hard by Kevin and Melissa Fredericks, and they talked about how they both grew up in the church, Sunday school, youth group, Wednesday Bible study, choir, vacation Bible school, doing all the things. But when they got married, they were not equipped to be a husband and a wife. They were not equipped to play these roles. All that time in church, and we don't know how to resolve conflict with our spouse. All that time in church, and we still don't know proper discipline for our children, proper training for our children. When we have talked to couples who are on the brink of divorce, we ask them about their premarital counseling, and some of them have had it at their church and it was a joke. It didn't give them the proper heads ups to know what they were walking into. And so many families will submit prayer requests for so-and-so got locked up, so-and-so's pregnant, so-and-so lost his job, all of these prayer requests. But where is the training? Where's the training to prevent these things? Where's the training to navigate these issues? It's certainly in scripture. So we've seen this as a gap in Black churches that are not equipping young Black Americans to be husbands, to be wives, and all of the issues that we see, all of the wounds that I described earlier are a function of broken families. So for those folks who say, race doesn't matter and all of that stuff, tell me that when you look at your local news and you see all the mug shots for everybody arrested that weekend were Black men. Tell me that race doesn't matter when you look on Instagram and social media and some of the most vulgar sexual displays are by young Black women. Tell me that there's not a particular issue going on with this particular group of people. I hope this helps explain where we stand, what our position is, and what our goals are. Please comment, like, share, subscribe to the channel. I would love to hear in the comments if you know of other ministries that are also looking to address the dysfunction and the brokenness in Black families. We would love to lock arms with them and support them. We do not want this to be like our neighborhoods where there's a million little churches all operating in a silo. At some point, this has to become a movement. At some point, this has to become a force where we are unified and we have aligned goals so that the next generation doesn't have to deal with this. The next generation, we can break those patterns for them and see them in much healthier, more stable families.